Welcome back to the BioNexus Health Podcast series, another episode. This is not just for autism uprooted. This is for everyone that we see in my practice: Lyme disease, mold, biotoxin illness, chronic illness, autoimmune issues, cancer, all of the above, including autism, of course. It is my great pleasure and honor to have with us today Dr. Besner. Dr. Rob Besner is the Chief Science Officer, device developer, and co-founder of Therasage, the premier line of infrared healing products. Now, Robbie, as us friends call him, is the co-founder and chief science officer of Therasage, has always been an advocate of natural health and wellness. Graduating from Boston University in pre-med, engineering, psychology, and business. Wow. Well, he continued on to postgraduate work at Case Western Medical School and holistic medicine. After many years of illness, Dr. Besner's teenage daughter was diagnosed with Lyme disease. This began his mission to find alternative, holistic, and naturopathic avenues of treatment. Along his journey, he discovered the amazing healing effects of infrared frequencies and began developing specialized devices and applications to help his daughter and her health challenge. I use the products myself, for my son Brian as well. And the purpose of today's podcast is to speak about the importance of good detoxification and exploring the far infrared option. So Rob is a professor for the World Federation of Chinese Medicine Societies. He's an annual contributor at the World Committee on Infrared. He's also a member of the Education Committee of the prestigious Hippocrates Health Institute. Robbie is a presenter at many medical, integrative, and anti-aging health conferences, as well as an invited contributor on many podcasts. In fact, quite a number of you must have heard him speak before. It's been wonderful knowing Rob for so many years, and I know I lean on his knowledge of infrared sauna, heat therapy for detoxification purposes. Rob has been on TV health shows around the world. He's a best-selling author, considered a leading scientist in the field of integrated infrared technology. And Dr. Besner continues to research and develop new devices and health science applications to bring the power of natural healing to all of us with chronic illness that have immensely benefited from his expertise. So allow me now to welcome Robbie, my friend Robbie, the one and only Dr. Rob Besner, to today's podcast.
Welcome to the BioNexus Health Podcast with Dr. Jody A. Dashore, who holds a PhD in integrative medicine, is board certified in integrative pediatrics, an internationally recognized pioneering clinician, and author. And now here's your host of BioNexus Health Podcast, Dr. Jody A. Dashore.
So there's Robbie. Dr. Besner, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you. And Dr. Dashore, thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast and giving me an opportunity to reach out to your tribe, to the people that follow you, to your community, and share with you some of my latest research and also some of the things that I think what might be really important for people to understand about detoxification, about, my area is harnessing full spectrum infrared sun frequencies, so infrared sauna and healing pads and different applications. And so fire away, ask me whatever you will. And that's what I love about, our interchange, our relationship. It's so in the moment, right?
Yes.
There's nothing needs to be rehearsed. We're all very have good command of our information in a way, right?
Yes. Yes. You know everything about infrared and far infrared technologies. I've known you for over a decade, I believe now, right,
Oh
Robbie?
yeah,
We met
easily. Yeah,
very
easily.
long ago. Yeah. So, what's been coming to my attention is the awareness amongst the chronic illness community, even actually more than that, even amongst the health and wellness community, the importance of maintenance of detoxification and safe detoxification. And infrared and far infrared technologies have risen to the forefront of that. And I've been I've been fielding a lot of questions, and I'm like, you know what? Let me contact Robbie and just have him blow us all away with his expertise and information. I don't know anyone better. I mean, I've been using your products for my family, and there's something about not just the fantastic uh, benefits of far infrared. It's the warmth, the healing, but with you've come up with harnessing the best frequencies available. And I've decided that I'm going to invite you and I'm going to ask you what the secret is. Nah, just kidding. But what would you, if I came to you and said, Dr. Besner, should I try infrared for detoxification? I have severe chronic illness. Will I face, detox reactions, die-off reactions? It scares me. What is the best way? Is it even appropriate for me? So what would you tell me, Rob?
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, first off, great question. And I know that it runs across the minds of many people out there. What are the most modern methods of detoxification? Which ones are the safest way? You touched on a few different topics that are a little bit touchy because, as you know, and you've seen in your clinic and in your practice over the years, people present themselves, particularly in chronic ailments or in chronic disease areas, infectious disease areas, their bodies present their symptoms in different ways. But one thing that seems to be unified among all of us, whether you're expressing as a chronic with chronic challenges or just normal in everyday life, the world that we're living in today is very toxic. We have problems with our air quality, our water quality, and certainly our food qualities, depending on where they're farmed and whether they're genetically modified or organic and the degrees of that.
That's right.
And so we're all suffering from that same challenge of global environmental toxicity. And if you're living in an inner city, even probably more so because of the carbon footprints and the concentration of cell towers, which is another stressor that brings out oftentimes genetic proclivities or affects your epigenetics, which is part of the way we express ourselves these days. So it is a real concern. And you should know right off the bat, even though, we make what I consider to be the gold standard, often considered by other practitioners the gold standard in integrated full spectrum infrared devices, which is what our company is about, the company Therasage. But aside from that, there's a safe way to do this. And we take a kind of a low and slow approach, a very conservative approach, because we assume everyone is toxic, depending on the degree, right? And what we've discovered in clinic, and I'm sure you've probably seen this in your practice, that toxicity and inflammation run kind of on the same roads together, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.
Right.
Sorry,
And
go ahead.
yeah, no. And generally, well, my area and why we started was with our daughter contracting Lyme disease more than 25 years ago. And that's basically when was the genesis of our company 25 years ago. But inflammation is generally the source of most symptoms of kind. So if we can lower inflammation, or if we can lower toxicity, hence lower inflammation, then we lower some symptoms. And even though we may not be immediately addressing the root cause of what the challenge is, we certainly are making the patient and the customer feeling much more comfortable, sort of getting back to some kind of normality for them, which makes the customer and the patient feel good. And it also is satisfying to the doctor and gives the practitioner a little bit more time to investigate the root cause and unpack that in a sort of a very chronological, systematic approach.
Right.
And so similar to you, we're very integrated and functional in our way of viewing things. And now let's home in on infrared a little bit. What's so special about that, and why that we found that, or sort of how we found it, and why we feel it's so important for basically people to have in their, mostly everybody's household, and using it in their lives every day to stay somewhat even from the toxicity or perspective, right?
Right.
And so full spectrum infrared wavelengths is an extraction of sunlight. And so the sun shines on the earth. There's been many studies. In fact, the clinical science on infrared historically is more than 100 years old. There's many assays that are published in some of the most well-read medical magazines, like the New England Journal and so forth, on the topic. Now, that being said, what Therasage has done is taken sort of a little unusual approach, because we've taken the more sort of traditional medical approach. All of our devices are listed with FDA as classified as Class 2 medical. And so we've gone through a lot of the third-party scrutiny of testing the materials and electrically testing our equipment so that we meet the highest standards, global highest standards, because FDA is considered recognized in every country in the world as being one of the highest credentialed organizations, I guess is the best way to put that, right?
Yes,
So that being said, many of the other competitors and people out there, they're not really, haven't gone through all of those standards and regulatory procedures to bring their products or devices to market. That separates us a little bit from the rest, but mostly it gives the practitioner like yourself a lot of comfort in recommending our products, because we've gone through all that testing. And so we feel we're very honored to be able to broadcast that and certainly bring that to the public, but bring it in a very high level professional manner. And even though the devices look somewhat simple to operate and look innocent in their own right, they are Class 2 medical devices, and they need to be used properly. And for that reason, I'm loving this discussion, because you really can't like overdose on sunlight or infrared frequencies, but you can overdo it. And so, for instance, you have a chronic patient or an individual that's real toxic, and they jump in our infrared sauna that's designed to mobilize all the toxins in your body, and you dive a little bit too deep into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, then you're going to have a detox response.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have safely used infrared sauna technology with patients of all age groups. Meaning, I see a lot of clients with autism that are in the younger age group. And when I say all age groups, I need to specify and clarify a little bit as well that, I've had the youngest would be 3.5-year-old child sitting on mom's lap in the sauna. And the oldest I've had is 87 years old, my mom.
Okay.
Who's used the infrared technology as well, and everything's worked well. just like you mentioned, slow build up. You don't just jump in and dive off the deep end. Hey, I'm going to be doing infrared for 3 hours today, and it's my first session.
Right.
So that is not something that you can't be gung ho about any detoxification, just like you cannot be gung ho when you're doing any antimicrobial therapy with herbals.
Right.
You are going to have detox response and a die-off response as well, sometimes depending on toxins. Now, speaking of that, right? What do you think about, does infrared therapy have any antimicrobial effects?
Oh, yeah, of course it does. But I really, before we jump into that answer, just to address from 3 years to 87, that's a pretty broad range. And we do have special protocols for purposes, meaning like a child under, let's say, 20 or 18, their heart rates are generally, their resting heart rates are much higher or faster beats than the average adult. So their metabolisms are actually going to respond much quicker to infrared therapy than the average adult. And then the other specialty group might be the older person that's a little bit more fragile and the way their bodies respond. And so again, low and slow, we really fine tune our approach based on the individual's needs. They're the way that they're presenting themselves, whether they're just looking for optimal health or they've actually got a health challenge that they're working with. And then we consider the demographic, because people in higher altitudes, their bodies will respond differently than sea level.
That's a good point. Yes. Very
Okay.
true. Yes.
As well as, the age groups. And so, but we've actually had mothers that had 0-year-olds, like, they were breastfeeding and they were with their child in the sauna.
Oh,
And
have you? Oh, that's
yeah.
good to know.
Yeah. So
Oh,
we've done
fantastic.
that.
Okay.
So that's extra special. Yes, we have experienced sort of that full range. And so now let's address your question. Please restate that one more time. The one that yeah.
Sure. What are your thoughts on, if any, antimicrobial effects associated with infrared therapy?
Perfect. Okay, so as most of you know that are tuning in, microbes have a lifespan of themselves, right? So, and they also have certain qualities. Most of them are anaerobic in nature, meaning that they don't need a lot of oxygen in order for them to be able to live and thrive. And so for that, they can migrate to areas of the body that have less oxygen or less blood flow per se, and it gives them sort of places to hide, particularly when it comes to Lyme disease and the co-infections and many of the bacteria and parasites of the body. Now, what's interesting about infrared is that, again, this is a spectrum of sun energy. It's a force of nature in a sense, just like water and air. And so when you're working with the microbial world, particularly with what they call the smart bugs, which could be Lyme for this discussion, that can easily sense a chemical change in the body, then alter their own body shape from being, let's say, out in the open to a balled up into a cyst state. It will burrow into soft tissue and sort of hide, in a sense, from the prevailing chemicals or antibiotics or whatever might be going on to change the blood chemistry. And the patient will experience a sense of relief in a way. They go into remission from their symptoms, because the actual parasite or co-infections aren't actively working in their bodies. They're kind of hibernating for the time until when they can come out again. So now, when you're using infrared, there's particularly some great things. But when you're in the sauna, one thing that these anaerobes and the microbes don't like is elevated core temperature. And so when you get in sauna, again, you can't do this right away, but as we work out towards I love the analogy of the pool, right? As we move closer to the deep end, where you might be in the sauna for 45 minutes to close to an hour, and maybe for temperatures up as in the elevated 160 to 170 range, which our sauna goes to, and most of the wooden traditional saunas do not get up that warm, or they take hours to get there, where ours takes virtually 15 minutes to go from room temperature to 140. So we can raise your core temperature, creating a false fever, or what's like more formally known as hypothermia, we
Mhm.
can raise that core, which will affect the microbe world in a sense, because when they feel the change in the heat, their bodies, what happens is it changes their environment, the internal environment that they live in. And so what happens is that they don't replicate as quickly, and non-replicating, or their activity starts to slow down, almost like they're going into hibernation in a way. And so they're using less of your body's resources. They're also pooping, which is a toxin. So they're pooping less because they're less active. And they're not replicating at the same rate that they were when they were out in the open, aspiring and just having a sort of a party at your expense, right? Using
Right.
your resources from your body. And so one aspect is hypothermia, and that would slow down the replication, allowing your own natural immune system and maybe any other kinds of protocols, particularly the ones like the natural ones that you prescribe from your clinic, that'll give your body a chance to actually come back and be stronger and use your natural resources, your natural immunity, to start fighting back or rebalancing the terrain or inner milieu of the body. So that's one aspect. The other one is, as I mentioned earlier, these organisms are anaerobic. And so one of the initial features, when infrared wavelengths come into the body, they create a vibration. It's called a bioresonance. And that vibration liberates warmth, mostly in the areas where the vibrations harbor, which is your densest parts of your body, your muscle mass or your organ tissue, which are the most vascular areas of your body, right? So now we've got this beautiful sun energy coming into the body. It creates a vibration. It warms up that organ or muscle group. Those areas are also the most vascular parts of the body. And so vicariously, those veins and arteries, they start to warm up, and it creates a physiological process that's called vasodilation. So now we're going to start to expand these vessels, allowing more blood flow. And as you know, blood carries all of your DNA, RNA, your genetic material for healing. It carries nutrition and it carries oxygen. So now we're fighting these microorganisms with nature because they don't like oxygen. We supply more oxygen. Two things happen. They start to die off because that'll affect them that way. And or we just slow down their own replication process.
Reproduction process.
Yeah. So either way, the body is the winner, the individual is the winner. And what are we doing? We're just using natural resources, nature, so we can sneak attack on these organisms by just, I kind of say, killing them with kindness or killing them with love, like the love of nature, right? What it's been given us as tools. So,
Yes.
we're proud as a company to harness these frequencies for that reason, because we can really create that primal healing process.
I love the analogy you gave, as well as the way you explained that it is important to have detoxification on board to create that semblance for the microbes that for now they're safe, they're in biofilms, in the cysts, they're hibernating, and then, bam, bring in the herbals and eradicate at
Right.
the same time. So it's very important. I always try and explain to all my patients that it's very important to have detoxification methodology. Whatever may suit you best. We always have discussion. And yes, I couldn't agree with you more on bio individualization and customization of the protocol to each patient with infrared saunas as well, right? You have to look at the age, you have to look at the patient's load of toxicity, the
Right.
patient's right physiological, biochemical. It needs to be a medical model utilizing naturopathic options. So that's something I absolutely love. That the fact that you are so evidence based, as well as you have naturopathic methodology at the core.
Right, exactly. And what we have noticed, and particularly in clinic, when we talk to patients, we want to make sure that they've got a free and open detox pathway even before we start a protocol. And what we notice, a lot of practitioners, they just go right into the protocol without understanding whether or not that patient really has the ability, once we detoxify, once we mobilize the toxin, can their bodies really get the poison out, get the toxin out? And so
Right.
many of these protocols work, but certainly if the, for lack of better terms, like your sewerage system, the body's ability to actually get and expunge these poisons, these toxicants out, if that isn't in somewhat operating procedure, and we do have many roads, like certainly in sauna, sweating is one of the most efficient ways to get poisons out, but you do have, your liver and kidney and different filtering organs. You have your bile that's from your lymphatic system. That certainly is another detox pathway. So peeing, pooping, sweating, movement, creating lymphatic drainage is also important. And if those avenues aren't opened and if not investigated beforehand, then you create this toxic event in the sauna. There'll be a little bit of a die-off, yeah. But the patient may not have the benefit if they don't have the benefit to expel these poisons, then we're just creating another toxic event on top of the toxic event, which generally isn't very comfortable for all parties,
Customization as well as collaboration with practitioners is key for the best outcomes for the client, because there are many chronically ill patients out there that like to self-treat. And it becomes, a bit of a mess, because I'll often get patients that have tried everything on their own, but not necessarily in the right order.
Oh, yeah.
You can't be, and again, I appreciate you mentioning that certain things have to be in place before you attempt something as effective and, as deeply cleansing as for infrared sauna. So Rob, you mentioned sweating. That reminds me of a question that I'm asked by many patients, and I wanted to pose that to you if I may.
Okay.
The question is, many of my clients are affected with mold biotoxin illness as well. So you have a sauna where you have, often multiple family members use it for, and eventually they are able to sweat really nice. So will that in different kinds of saunas, you have the personal sauna, you also have the really beautiful one that I have in my office. We love it, is the full-size sauna, which is made with natural wood components. So actually not just one question, two questions. So will there be any mold buildup as the person sweats inside a wood sauna or a non-wooden sauna? And second is EMFs. How long is it safe to be in there? And I know your products are low EMF, so if you can elaborate on the mold and the EMF component of things, I would appreciate that.
Okay, of course. Well, mold is an important topic in general, particularly with infectious disease, and with Lyme in particular. We've seen in clinic that when you have a Lyme patient that's basically managing their symptoms, but then they get exposed to mold, then they could go from managing to almost bedridden overnight. That's how dramatic the effect can be. As far as the materials, the infrared frequencies themselves, the wavelength will kill any airborne bacteria or viruses. So anything that might be existing in the sauna is not effective, because the actual wavelengths and the temperature will kill all that activity. So nothing can really grow inside the sauna itself, the wooden one. And then mostly we focus on the portables because they're a little bit more affordable. They've got different benefits and features. So we sell a lot of both, but what we're known for is the portable one. Yes. For both the size, the convenience, the portability, the pricing, all that kind of stuff. And there we're using non-toxic materials, both to the body, as well as they are antimicrobial. It's natural bamboo material, and it won't actually hold any of the bacterias or parasites, or particularly the only thing that can get transferred in a sauna from one person to another in their sweat is basically their toxins. So if you go to a public sauna, whether it be infrared or hot rock or steam room, make sure you're sitting on your own towel and that you're not sitting on on a pool of someone else's sweat, because in theory, you could be uptaking their poisons as they relieve them in the process of you trying to get rid of yours, you know? Um, so, so in terms of mold, I think we're pretty much covered, because we won't allow any mold or anything airborne, viruses or bacteria, to exist in our cabins. And we have put together pretty effective protocols for people that have systemic mold spores and have affected them that way. It's both liberating toxins with our format, our infrared full spectrum format, and also combining the use of natural binders like activated charcoal or bentonite clay, or a zeolite or silica derivatives called zeolite. And so those are kind of like biosponges. So in one hand, we mobilize the toxin, and in the other hand, we gather those toxins and bind them together. So it makes it easier for the body to expunge them, and takes a lot of the heavy burden off of the filtering organs like liver, kidney, pancreas, large intestine, and so forth. So we're pretty effective on the protocols, and we've shared them over the years with each other, but certainly the most available ones, or the most modern ones, I can share with you, and you can share with your community on call. So we can do that together, maybe after the podcast.
Yes.
Now, as far as EMF, we started remediating electromagnetic fields almost 20 years ago, like 18, 19 years ago, before it was somewhat fashionable. And it really was on a whim. I had no idea that the cell phone industry would get as robust as it is today. I had no idea we were going to be up to 5G. And by the way, if you think that there's just 5G microwaves on the tower, then I tell the community that they're completely wrong, because the government is now using 7 and 10G frequencies on the same micro towers as the 4 and 5G. So we're really being bombarded with exogenous frequencies.
I agree. Yes, unfortunately.
Now, years ago, my whim was, well, here I am developing and harnessing these, beautiful frequencies of nature, the healing frequencies of nature. But yet I'm delivering them through a vehicle like the infrared sauna or the healing pads, which are the on-body devices that we make. And so if you plug something into a wall that's got alternating current, the kind of electricity we have here in the US, or even if it's coming from a battery, there is an electromagnetic field that's being generated at the same time. So my notion was, well, how does the body reconcile protecting itself from EMF and at the same time receive all the beauty of nature? And so I didn't really know. So I just said, okay, look, if I could just get EMF off the table, if I could figure out a way, which I did back then, that was shielding and blocking, to remediate, then the person in my sauna could really receive all the benefits of nature, which was my goal. Now, with that being said, I was not satisfied with just shielding and blocking, because it's very reactive, meaning that the government initiates a 3G network, and then I remediate and fix all of my devices for 3G. And by the time I get it into your home, Dr. Dashore, they're already coming out with 4G, because the money is in the gaming and faster surfing and faster cell phones, and now it's in electric everything, right? Electric cars and bikes and so forth. So we're being surrounded with man-made frequencies that basically oscillate at a higher frequency than our body's frequency. And so when we're immersed in those wavelengths, it actually kind of knocks us out of electric balance, for lack of any better terms. And each of our cells in our body are little batteries. And so we're very sensitive to electromagnetic fields. Some of us more than others, and I'm sure you've seen this, some patients that are not only like chemical or, let's say, dietary, like they have allergies and certain they're affected by foods and
sensitivities. Yes, multiple chemical sensitivities. Oh my goodness, yes, with mold exposure, with chronic illness. That is so common,
Yeah. Do you see them also having electrical, having sensitivity? Yeah, exactly. Yes. So they all come hand in hand. It's just about our environment.
That is so beautifully explained. Thank you, Robbie.
You're welcome.
So, those were the most important questions that I had received from my clients, or I on an ongoing basis. And I explained, but I think you are so eloquent because that's your field of expertise with what you do. So,
Thank you.
oh, wonderful. Absolutely. Thank you. So too much of a good thing is not a good thing. So my last question to you would be, what would you say to the people that would like to do an 45 minutes to an hour of uh, sauna therapy, infrared sauna therapy every day?
Yeah, well, actually there was 2 points. That's a good one. Earlier you mentioned things about sequencing. So I think that that's important because we've seen that in clinic. And for instance, we follow nature. We study nature's effects and how it affects both the plant and animal kingdom. We also study ancient cultures and what healthcare attributes each of these different societies and cultures have embedded either in their religions, their prayers, just their normal habitat. And we try to combine all that stuff in what we do with our different devices. So we find that that is really important for basically primal healing. Now, for instance, in nature, we wake up to the sun in the morning, or we should, but now we're living in urban societies, right? So we can black out our windows, we can block out the sunlight. And so that throws off, sometimes it can throw off our circadian rhythm or our bioclock, right? Which is so important for us to get the proper hormones of melatonin and serotonin and the proper cycles of sleeping, so that actually filters all of our organs. So the optimal time to do sauna is basically as nature brings it. When you wake up to sunlight, the best time to do sauna would be the first time in the morning. Now that's the optimal. But you've probably seen this in your clinic, that if I had to choose between the optimal choice or the practical choice for my patient, I'd always choose practical, because we're looking for a lifestyle change. We're looking for people to look at infrared sauna not necessarily as a way to get to remedy their particular health challenge, but more of, how do I stay vital? What kinds of messages can I give to my children? So outside the US, if you go to the Baltic states or to the Ukrainian states, people, they have saunas in their community. They get together as on a social level. They have them in their homes. Sauna is just part of their lives. It's not just that you do every so often when you're not feeling well, right? And so that's really the message that we're trying to bring out, is really, how do we make this multi-generational? How do we make it fun? How do we make it not, how does the sauna not represent your health challenge, but more like giving yourself love and abundance and the things that you need in order for you to support yourself emotionally and as well as physically, right? Super important. So earlier part of the day is really important. The number of days that you do it consecutively, like if you could do it every day, we get toxic every day, right? So if we could do it for 30 minutes every day, my God, you could stay even with the amount of toxicity the environment gave you from the day before and start pecking away at the ones, from the past, right? So that would be important. What the time is and what the temperature is for your session. And this actually answers part 2 of your question. We see this mostly with chronics, honestly. They're so sick and tired of being sick and tired that when they start to get some results from sauna, they want to overdo it. And like I said earlier, you can't overdose, but you can overdo it, right? And so I spend a lot of time, particularly if I see that they're very symptomatic with patients that present themselves to us in our coaching, I say to them, whoa, you've been symptomatic for a couple of years now, right? Because you're chronic. It probably took you a few years to actually build up enough toxins to create that inflammation that's creating that expression of some kind of symptom, right?
Right.
And so it takes years to get to that. This isn't like a magic pill. The healthy way to do it, it's sort of, I fashion it like when you're climbing a mountain, this toxic mountain, you do it one step at a time. So coming down the mountain, to do it really it should be done gently and succinctly, basically one step at a time, right? And going up a mountain, when you're climbing up, it's really hard to fall when you're climbing, but when you're coming down, you're descending and you go too fast, you can fall right on your nose pretty fast, right? So we try to go low and slow on and kind of pump the brakes, so to speak, with a lot of the chronics, that particular ones that are very symptomatic, and explain to them that it's going to be a process, that it will take a while, but every single day, every single time you get into that sauna, you're going to inch yourself a little bit closer to the end goal, to your end game, to your health and wellness plan, to getting you to where you're actually back to, sense of normality. And I think that that is the greater goal. And I think we're looking for something sustainable. Not, we're giving you a little bit of happiness every day, but when you add up all those little, hugs and kisses and that bits of happiness at the end, when you look back, you go, oh my God, like I can't believe how much better I feel than I did from the month before. And that's the kinds of messages that we get from our patients, and we hear from various doctors. And when you chime in and you tell us, you give us your anecdotal and clinical results of things you're doing, and it just makes us so happy to be involved with you, and certainly your demographic, because it's such an underserved population that really needs so much attention, particularly with your expertise.
Yes. I appreciate what you said, because not everyone understands that it took you 7 years, 8 years to get where you are today, to this, level of heavy toxicity and chronic illness. You cannot attempt to reverse that in a couple of months. Like people will attempt in a couple of weeks. I'm tough, I can do this. No. You have to respect the complexity and the fragility of your internal circuits, and fragility is a beautiful word. It's not calling yourself weak. It is this beautiful, intricate, fragile, I don't know, I'm getting a little carried away, but because
No, it's a delicate relationship between all of these different systems. And in today's world, particularly in the allopathic approach, they work on what's called a reductionist. So they want to really kind of reduce it down to one single cause.
Right.
But what I've seen is that the body's complex, and generally the causation is complex as well. But the way to heal, the primal healing, to create that primal platform of just a safe home where the water is good and the air is good, and the food that you're eating is somewhat controlled and more towards the organic side if you can. But things like that, having an elemental place where you can go, that that you're safe from and free from the external influences and stressors, I think is a really important thing.
Yes, as much as possible.
And then,
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then, as what I've seen, I'm sure you have, is the miracle of the body, right? Like
that's exactly. That's what I was, because anytime I speak of detoxification, chronic illness, it brings me back to the 7.5 years that it took me to clear Brian. And you've met Brian when he spoke at Autism One a couple of years back. Yeah. So, right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Everyone asks me, can you bring my child to where Brian is? And I'm like, we can certainly attempt that. That's always my goal for all my children around the world, but your goal should be to understand the fragility of the process. It needs to be, you need finesse. You need a lot of patience. You need to go slow so you can heal better, not necessarily faster. Like absence of disease is not good health. A lot more goes into being healthy than just the absence of disease. And so that's one thing I try to explain to all my families is be gentle, be kind, but be thorough.
Right.
By all means. But you need to give yourself time. You need to allow yourself, almost everyone, Robbie, is as soon as they start feeling better, they're out trimming the hedges and planting new trees. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I feel terrible. But okay, what did you do? Did you So that you need a lot more respect for your own body. You need to allow some time for your body to heal and recuperate and go back to its sparkling natural health and vitality and wellness in its own time.
Right.
I don't, it's not advisable to just, like you mentioned, expect a magic pill out of anything. So anyone watching today, please understand that, right? Infrared saunas are
Sure.
not a magic pill. Um, you know, you need to work with your practitioner and come to me if you are interested, and we will come up with a plan for you. I have an open hotline with Dr. Besner, so we can problem solve if there is any special conditions, that we need to focus on, or that need to be addressed further. But by all means, I'm glad Dr. Besner was here today to explain the pros. I don't see any cons. If you
Oh,
Yeah, I don't really, because your product is I think it dots almost all the I's and crosses all the T's. You're so particular, as a dad of a child with chronic illness. We like, it's our tribe, and we strive to give the best to everyone, just like we would our own child.
exactly. Exactly.
So,
And I think to your point, it's really important for people to know that these types of technology are available. We think that we make a little better mousetrap, but still to understand that you can bring solutions into your home that works with your practitioner, like you're the main quarterback. But this is a way that you can bring self-care into your house. You can teach your family how to do that, at young ages, or just to understand that this is a way to maintain the integrity of your health. Yes, it's a slow road back, but if you build a strong foundation and you give your body the nutrition that it might be deficient from, either the ailment, then given the nutrition, what I call a little bit of nature, like sunlight and good air and good food, then the body will regenerate and just bounce back. I want to say exponentially. It may take a while to build that foundation, but then it's almost like an avalanche effect where you're coming down that mountain and you're gaining good health, and then good health sort of promotes other good health from the new healthy cells that are coming out, and before you know it, when you look back, you can't believe how far you've gone on your road to your journey back to wellness, to your new self. And I see this every day in, our applications. I'm very joyful that what we've done is just one piece of the puzzle. Certainly we're not everything, but if I can afford bring our devices into your home at an affordable rate, make them very accessible, make them, easy to use, and sort of portable in their own rights, so that you can have them as part of your normal daily routine, to surround yourself with all these loving energies that will just do nothing but create that primal foundation. That with, the guidance of someone like yourself, and all of your disciplines, your supplements, your line of remedies are none to beat. The time and the care that you put into all of your formulations is really remarkable.
thank you.
So it speaks volumes of you and your constitution. Certainly, the work you've done with your son and with your families is, that you work with is outstanding. That's why somehow we found each other. The universe brought us together, and I will always support, you and your clinic and your downline, your community, in any way that we can. And so happy that you had me today to talk. I hope that we covered some bases that certainly were cares and concerns of the people that are listening in.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and sharing your valuable thoughts, and of course your valuable time with my patients and my listeners today.
My
Much
pleasure.
appreciated.
Oh yeah, anytime. Bring me back again when you think that I can add value to your community.
Awesome. Yes, I might have to take you up on that, Rob.
Okay, well, you got my number.
Well, okay. So, for everyone watching, thank you so much for joining me today. I will say goodbye and be well, stay safe. Namaste.
Thank you for joining Master Herbalist Dr. Jody A. Dashore, Director of the BioNexus Health Clinic and BioNexus Herbals, on the BioNexus Health Podcast, where we explore and share information and stories about recovering and healing from chronic and environmental illnesses such as mold biotoxin illness, Lyme disease, autism spectrum disorder, fatigue, Crohn's and colitis, mast cell activation syndrome, PANS, and more. Please help us grow our message by subscribing to our podcast channel and sharing the podcast on your social networks. For more information, visit bionexushealth.com.
Information within this video, audio, or text, collectively known as the podcast, has not been reviewed by the FDA. Nothing within the podcast is intended as or should be construed as medical advice. Information is for general informational and educational purposes only. Consumers of the podcast should consult with their healthcare practitioners for medical recommendations. Seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider. Do not disregard the advice of a healthcare provider based on any information from the podcast. The information within the podcast may contain information concerning dietary supplements or over-the-counter products that are not drugs. Our dietary supplement products are not intended for use as a means to cure, treat, prevent, diagnose, or mitigate any disease or other medical or abnormal condition.